You know, oftentimes you see me doing all these programs and I'm all alone. So I've got Brittany here with me. She's one of the friends of a friend of ours. You're actually a granddaughter, right? Oh,
Yep.
to someone that we know. And you're visiting from Canada.
Yep.
Ah, all the way down to Florida. You know, you kids have got to know something. When you travel, anytime, did you drive or fly?
Drive.
Oh, no. They drove. Did you pick any rocks up?
No.
Not all. Say, you guys are got to be educated because as you go and you travel, even if you stop at a rest stop or get a bite to eat or fill the gas, in the car, you really got to look on the ground and look for rocks. And after about a day on the road, you'll have the whole trunk full of rocks, and your car is going to drive. No, well, but anyway, the thing is to get small rocks. For example, like right there, those look like nothing rocks. They're itty bitty nothings, and those have been found right out on the street. And those are pieces of shell. In fact, one of them happens to be the whole shell. Now, a lot of people just step on them, Brittany. They're careless. They don't care. But see, in Canada, you do have seashells. Have you ever seen these shells and rocks in Canada? They're up there?
Yes.
You have? Okay. For example, this big one here, this big one, it's got a seashell in it. And this rock here came from Indiana. See? Now, you know what's interesting about that? Here's the seashell right here. How can you have a seashell in the state of Indiana, which is the United States? How can you have a seashell in Canada when there's no ocean? You got any ideas?
No.
Well, it so happens that parts of Canada, as I know, parts of the United States was underwater. And since it was underwater, it was under the oceans. And since it was under the oceans, you're going to have what in the ocean water? You're going to have sharks and all that neat stuff, and seashells. So when the ocean left, which it did, what did all the shells do? They died. Can you say, aw? They died because they ran out of water. Now, let's look at this chart over here. You know, we all know that there's a lot of water in the whole world. You know, well, they tell us what? They tell us there's 3/4 of the earth is covered with water. And this water is salt water. And that means you can find shell animals and bones of animals in all those places in the water. Okay? Now, there was a time when the earth was almost completely covered with water. And, of course, there was the flood. And the flood, of course, covered the entire earth. Do you know when the climbers went to the top of Mount Everest, they found seashells?
No.
Isn't that something? And that's the highest mountain in the world. Seashells up there. And they were up there because that was the flood. It went that far. You know, it flooded that whole area. Now, and look at this chart right here. In Florida, you cannot find any dinosaur bones. Say, aw. Aw. And here's the reason why. Florida was underwater. Not because of the Great Flood, but this picture here shows us. For those of you who happen to know what the state of Florida looks like, the shape, you see it's a peninsula, means it's water on three sides. And then right in the middle of Florida is where the most popular place. It's that big tourist attraction everybody goes to. And that was a good place to build it because that's always been high, dry land. But Florida used to be more than twice its size. That real dark line going around the outside, that's how big Florida used to be. So we had more land. But then the oceans got higher, or, well, how can water get higher? Oh, it gets deeper. If you take an ice cube and let it melt, what are you going to get?
Water.
Very good. Okay. So if you take the ice on the North and South Pole, and it gets hot enough in the Earth, what's it going to do to the ice at the North and South Pole?
Melt?
Yeah. So if you melt the ice at the North and South Pole, you put a lot of water in the oceans, which makes the oceans deeper. Now, since you're from Canada, don't buy any land in Florida. You see, because in about 5,000 years, Florida is going to be underwater again. So all your property is going to be no good. In fact, it's going to be so bad that amusement area in Orlando, they're going to be on dry land again when most of Florida goes under. And those people will be able to take a glass-bottom boat, and they'll be able to come all the way down to the Miami area, and they'll be able to look into the stadium, and they're going to see real dolphins playing football. Get it? Dolphins, the
Yes.
mammal? Okay. Now, what's a fossil? Most people think a fossil is a dirty old rock, you know, well, who cares? But I found this one, and way down an island in the south tip of Florida called Key Largo. Now look at that. You see that? You might step over it, you might pick it up and throw it away. But one thing I have learned about looking for fossils, no matter where you are in Canada or the United States, is to turn the rocks over. Look at this. Put your finger there and hold that. Cool. Oh,
Yeah.
rocks are usually cool to touch in. That is where a shell used to be. Say, oh. Oh. See, the shell used to be there. It fell out. So here it is. Oh, turn around the right way.
That way.
See, here it is. So when I picked this up, the shell fell out and left its print. We call that a print. Now, there's two ways you should collect fossils. You should collect the real things, the seashells, and you should also collect the prints, because sometimes you'll find the print and you'll never find the shell, because sometimes the shells get all busted up and broken up. So this is the print. Now, some of these prints have sparkles on them. Can you see there's a little bit of sparkle there? Almost.
Yep.
Okay, a little bit of sparkle. That sparkle is called crystal. It looks like sugar. All right? So what happens is that in the Florida area, by the way, a lot of the seashells get crystals. Seashells are made of calcium, and calcium is very good to make into crystals. So these things naturally give you a crystal. So when you start a fossil collection, collect two kinds, prints and the real thing. Okay?
Okay.
And then what you want to do is improve things as you go along. For example, there is a seashell. Not very exciting looking, but it is a seashell. But this is where you begin. I don't care where you are in the United States or Canada, find a seashell. This is a seashell that I found up near Quebec and Montreal. Okay? So you can also find these in Indiana, Michigan, northern Ohio, but mainly in the eastern part of the United States and Canada. Now that is a seashell. Now that seashell was alive when the oceans covered that part. And this other seashell you saw a minute ago, that was a recent seashell. In other words, the poor little thing died about 1,000 years ago. Not very recent. Oh, you like that? Oh, okay. All right, now, when you get a seashell like that, you're supposed to improve upon it. Now, there's different ways to improve your collections. Here's one way. The first thing to do is you get a bigger one. You know, find a bigger seashell. Can you see right there that little mouth?
Yes.
Okay. Those are actually two seashells stuck together. There's no more guts in there, though.
Yeah.
Sand got in there and all of it squished out, and all we have is two seashells stuck together. And we can see there, even in the camera, see the sparkling on it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not sugar, but that's calcite crystal. All right, how do you improve that? Well, stay right there, if you like. The way to improve it is to get a seashell. It's good to have two seashells together. But look at the crystal now. See how it's kind of like a fungus on there? It's really piling up on the shell, see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's still the next step. This is almost crystal all the way through. If I held this up to a pretty good sized bright light, I would be able to see a little bit of light coming through it. I have yet to ever find one that's crystal clear. If I do, I don't think I'm going to tell anybody because it'd be worth a lot. But see, these are just dirty old, sandy, beat up seashells. Have you ever seen anything like this up in Canada?
No.
Okay. Now, don't you think it's pretty neat though? Okay. Now, I would go up to Canada and say, boy, that sure is a neat seashell rock. And you say, oh, my whole backyard's full of these, you know, kind of a thing. And so what do you do as kids? Trade. Give me one of those, and I give you one of these, see? Because in Florida, these are all over the place. In Canada, in certain areas, and Ohio and Indiana, they're all over the place. So that's what you got to remember. Wherever you live, as I mentioned to you before, contact other people around the country in different countries. Mexico to the south and Canada to the north. And the idea to contact people like that, of course, is to let them know that you're there, of course, and also to to what? To share. Have you ever heard of American Online?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think there's a kid in the world that hasn't heard of American Online. Okay, I have an email address for the American Online, and I have what you call a website. You know what a website is?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a website. So those of you who know about computers, you know it. You can just contact me, email, or through the website, and you can ask questions. If you found a certain rock, if you're a super duper computer wizard, you could always fax it or something, or send a scanner, you know, all that silly stuff. I have one young lady, she always sends me a picture of her. A couple weeks ago, she sent me a picture of her dog through the email. So it can be done. But if you ever have any questions, that's what the whole idea is, to contact us through the email. Now, in Florida in particular, for those of you, your tourists are always coming down here. I don't mean to be rude, but you folks are always coming down here. You got to get to Florida. You got to go to Florida. You got to go to Florida. Well, I like Florida too. And I have gone around and got a hold of some great footage, we call it footage, of videos of certain areas. And shall we say it's a must place to see. And in other words, there are places that most people like tourists, they like to go to amusement parks and all. You got to get and see some of the geological neat stuff. Places where the rocks are neat. And so one of our must places to see, I want to show you on this video. Now, this is nothing more than just a lake. It's got a lot of ripples on it, and there's a reason for it. We'll keep going. People are swimming. You don't want to go to this place. It stinks because the water coming out of the ground right there, that's called an artesian well. Okay, that artesian well, they were looking for oil, and guess what?
What?
They didn't find any oil, and the water started bubbling out of the ground, and they were going to cap it, but they decided that the guy who was in the area, he bought the property, and they turned it into a tourist area. People would come down and they would bathe in that stinky water, and they thought it was a health springs, mineral springs, which it is to some extent. And now the state of Florida has turned into a park. All right, I got something else to show you on our charts over here. When you talk about fossils, it's such things as, well, were you one of the kids that saw the Jurassic Park? Did
No.
you see? Well, how about that? There are people who haven't seen it. All right. The Bible, I like to say, as far as fossils, we have fossils that were before the flood, after the flood, and something at the very bottom called pre-Adamite, which would be like before Adam and Eve. That is a Christian, the way you should look at fossils. Because you see, the earth is only supposed to be something like 7,000 years old, or maybe 8,000 years old, maybe a little bit more, and yet they say such things like dinosaurs were here 35 million years ago. Well, the Bible doesn't tell us when exactly, and that's another lesson we'll get into one day. But I would like to show you some of these fossils. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you if they're before Adam and Eve, after Adam and Eve, before the flood, Noah's flood, after the flood, and that's about it. Then we have some other things that occur. Now, during the times of the flood and everything, let's take a look at another chart here. We had a very interesting thing happen in the Caribbean, and it wasn't a hurricane. Do you know what the bottom part of the land is called between South America and North America is called?
No.
Okay, it's called Central America. And a piece of Central America broke off. And when it broke off, it made the Bahama Islands, it made Puerto Rico, it made all those neat things. And it's because the land shifted and moved around. Now, that can cause a lot of problems for animals. It's called, they'll drown. You see, because if a chunk of land moves off, can you imagine if Mama's on that chunk of land and Papa and the kids are stuck back in the other part? There goes Mama, drifting away. They have an actual term for that. It's called continental drift. But some people actually think that a lot of the animals, that's how they got around the world. One of the methods was continental drift. Because in the Bible, there's a guy named Peleg. You ever heard of him?
No.
Sounds like a pirate with a wooden leg, huh? Peleg. Anyway, during the Peleg's time, the world did go through separation. It was a separation of language and everything. And let's look at this next chart. One thing I like about this, you drove through Florida. Do you see any mountains?
No.
No. Do you have mountains in Canada?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There's some beautiful mountains in western Canada. there were volcanoes in Florida. And the triangles where we found volcanic ash. Volcanic ash is where a volcano has thrown up. They throw up, volcanoes do. Anyway. And then we have volcanic rock, the square, which means the black rock. And then they have lava, and lava is really the puke that comes out, all over the mountain. They have found that under Florida. Now on the top, they haven't found it because Florida has been under so much water that it's gotten buried with all dead animals and sea animals and all that thing. But if you dig deep enough, ask me how deep.
How deep?
8,000 feet. Is that deep enough?
No.
Okay. If you go down about 8,000 feet in southern Florida area, you can actually come right upon where the ancient lava flowed and the volcanic ash and all that. Florida used to be mountains. What is left of the Florida mountains is up near northern Georgia. All those mountains have been worn down by the flood, worn down by just glaciers, ice age, and all that stuff. Let's look at the next chart. This is the backbone, of the state of Florida. And there is a high area going right through the middle of Florida, and that's where that amusement area is that this man owns, and everybody goes to see. And that area is up on a high ridge. And that is why every time Florida goes underwater and comes out of water, that's still sitting there. For those people who have ever gone down to that area in Orlando, there's beautiful little rolling hills. And you can tell the hills, very easy to find, because there's orange trees. Did you happen to notice the orange trees? Probably did. You didn't come through Orlando, did you? You came down through...
We went past
Orlando. Okay. Did you wave at Orlando? Did you wave?
No.
Okay, so anyway, in the Orlando area, there's little hills with orange trees all over it. Those are sand dunes. You know what a sand dune is?
No.
Okay, it's a pile of sand. You ever seen pictures of the Sahara Desert? This is one mound of sand after another.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what Orlando was. But it wasn't a desert, but it was lots and lots of sand, but it was tropical. Now let's get the next chart. What happens is that as the water level changed in the state of Florida, you actually have animals being killed, and then the water would leave and the land would dry out. Other animals would come in, and we have no dinosaur bones and remains in Florida because there was no Florida. Illogical, huh? Now we did have swimming dinosaurs type animals, and we'll talk about that, of course, later on. All right, so the thing is, there's in your own area, no matter where you live, you go to those places, those boring places called libraries.
They're not boring.
They're not boring. Congratulations. Or you can look on the website. All these different places, you can find some awesome things about your area. Now you're getting old enough. You're going to be in what grade?
6.
6th grade. I don't know. Are you interested in this kind of stuff?
Yes.
Oh, okay, she is. She actually told me she's an artist. Can you see how you can be put to work here by making drawings and helping TV productions and all that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Look at this next chart. Arrows, huh? Isn't that exciting? Arrows. When the United States and Canada was covered with the ice sheet, all the animals came south to Florida and Mexico. They came down here because it was a nice place to visit. But then when they got down here, a lot of the animals got separated. You see how that it looks like a tongue hanging down there? It says ice sheet. Can't read it too well, but that's what it says. And that actually kept the animals from going from New York to California. They could not get across the United States because the ice was there. Who cares, right? You have to care. You see, because that is where you're going to find a lot of dead animals. Say, oh. And why are there dead animals? Because when the ice came down, it squished them. Or they froze to death. And then when the ice backed up, ta-da! There were the dead bodies. Gross, huh? Dead animals laying all over the place.
Ew.
Oh, yeah. When you have food, you put it in the refrigerator. Why? Keep it cold.
Yes.
What else? How about the freezer compartment? Why do you put things in there?
Keep it cold.
Keep it cold. What if you put meat in the freezer? Will it keep better?
Yes.
It does. It keeps better. All right. You know, they actually found a giant elephant in northern Russia that it was frozen all this period of time. And when they took it out and unthaw it, they ate the meat. And that was a big woolly mammoth from like before the flood or just after the flood. It'd actually be right after the flood. So the meat was still what you call fresh because it was frozen. All right, let me show you another one. This is a rock from Florida. Have you ever heard the word coral?
Yes.
All right. Coral rock is now becoming very difficult to get because the environmentalists are saying don't tear up the coral reefs. In fact, it's against the law to dig the coral out from the ocean. They don't get happy with that at all. So that's a piece of coral from the Keys. Here's a piece of coral from Michigan. See, it's the same thing. See, we got like circles and holes, and we tip this up. Circles and holes. Yeah. All right. Now, they're very easy to scratch. So they hand polish these. Whoops. And this is a hand polished coral rock from Michigan. And the city that you find this, for those of you who live in Michigan, would you please send me some? These are the only two I have. And maybe we can trade.
Cool.
Not you don't get to trade. But if you know anybody from this part of Michigan, say, hey, I want to trade. The name of the town is called Petoskey, Michigan. Guess what they call the rock? The name of the town. They call it the Petoskey Stone. Wasn't that really scientific? That was really clever, huh? They must have stayed up all night to try and think of the name of that rock. But you find them all along the shoreline of the lake up there, and people pick them up and hand polish them and sell them to the tourists.
Cool.
And they get good money for them. Now, I know you're not from areas where there's too much ocean. You ever heard of the word sand dollar?
Yes, I have.
You've heard the word. This is a sand dollar. This is an animal. It lives in the ocean. And that little hole is where his mouth used to be. And he wasn't solid like that because this poor animal has died. He got covered up with sand and he died, right? Say, ah. Aww. And the whole shell became sand, which came to a solid rock. This is what's neat about fossils. Good fossils, you can actually see the shape. That's the actual shape of what the sand dollar used to look like. Who cares, huh? But you see, wouldn't this be nice? You can find these on the beach as you're out here enjoying the sun and all that. You know, I know it's hot, but you get out there and you pick up one of these right off the beach. Take it back, and you got something. Take two. One to trade, one to keep. All right? Because you got, your teacher. You never know who would like something like that. Boy, I'd sure like that. But that's really neat. I sure like that. What do you got to trade? Of course, trade comic books or whatever, you know. But a good rock collector would collect and trade rocks. You don't switch off hobbies, you know. Now, this one here, they were going to put some boats across a lake, and then they found out the lake wasn't deep enough. So they had to make it deeper. And when they dug up all the dirt and threw it up on the shore, I found this. Look at the awesome shell stuck in there. Isn't that
Cool.
neat? Yeah. And if you were there when they pumped this out and you walked on it, you would lose your sneakers. What does that mean? Mud. Off comes your sneaker. So this was goo. Somebody said goo earlier this evening. So we have all this goo up there. And yet it's a solid rock. Because it was on the shore, it dried out, and we have seashells stuck in the mud. Are the seashells alive? Are they alive?
No.
They're about as dead as they can get. Okay, so a fossil. When you start your fossil collection,
Okay.
you look for either the fossil itself or a print. Okay? So that's it for number 1, and let's get on with 3 more, and we'll show you some more exciting fossils with Brittany.